from wherever you are in the world. My name is Stephen Wyatt, and today I'm joining you from the University of Moncton on the traditional lands of the indigenous Wolastoqiyik people in Eastern Canada. This first seminar here is being hosted by the University of Padova in Italy and is organized with the collaboration of IUFRO, the ForGEDI Task Force, SNS, IFSA, the Students Association, and IUFRO. So look, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to participants. Thank you especially to our speakers and panelists. Before we go any further, I'll just remind you that this session is being recorded. So please take note of that. All that is going on to the video feed are the speakers and the panelists. So the fact that you as a participant, you as an attendee are participating in this, that will not actually, your video or anything will not be recorded. Excuse me. Before we begin, I'd just like to briefly explain what is IUFRO. Many of you will know it, some of you won't. It's the International Union of Forest Research Organizations. It's a global network that brings together forest scientists, institutions, different stakeholders to collaborate on forest research and promote science-based solution to forestry issues around the world. There's around about 15,000 people who are involved in IUFRO as scientists coming in. So it's quite an important resource for forestry research. Within IUFRO, and I'm particularly pleased to be able to share this with you, IUFRO has just approved the establishment of a new task force on gender equity, diversity, and inclusion in forest-related sectors, the ForGEDI Task Force. And so that's who is organizing this today. Our objective here is really to move forward on gender equity, diversity, and inclusion, and particularly it's to build upon the success of the MOOC, the massive online course that many of you are familiar with and that we are celebrating today. Our MOOC, the ForGEDI MOOC, was developed under the initiative of a preceding IUFRO task force on gender equity, and the MOOC brought together 32 different organizations who are illustrated on the slide here, and more than 40 collaborators came together to develop the MOOC. We worked on it for 2 years, and our goal there was to try and build the connections, to bridge gaps in traditional forestry education. So far, we've had more than 1,900 people have enrolled in the MOOC, and we are really pleased, really happy with this, because it does actually show the need for this initiative. There's been a very low dropout rate, which is also really encouraging. So that shows that people are keen. They see it as a need to be available. Particularly, we're also very pleased that the first year of the MOOC was free with the ongoing support of SNS, Nordic Forest Research. We're now able to offer a second year of free access to the MOOC. So please, if you have not already registered and followed the MOOC, please feel free to do so. Oh, and I encourage you to do so. Today, we're going to be talking about, or our topic for today is building on that experience with the MOOC. So our topic is there, growing gender equity, diversity, and inclusion through forestry education, overcoming challenges, and making an impact. We're inviting our panelists and yourselves as participants to think critically about how education can serve not only as a tool for learning, but also as a space for resistance, for transformation, for empowerment. We all know what's happening in the world today. We're facing numerous ecological uncertainty. We've got social and economic issues, and we have growing inequality. And in this context, GEDI is not a luxury. GEDI is probably the most powerful weapon that we have with which we can use to change the world. So we'll be hearing today on from different educators, researchers, advocates who have made an impact, who are trying to make an impact, who have ideas on how to do this and how to share, how to advance on this with you. And that's not where I wanted to go. I'm sorry, I wanted to stop sharing and return. I am really sorry, but right, Tadora, please help me. I seem to be stuck in sharing mode.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm afraid we didn't see your slides, actually.
Okay.
But
I am very
really
sorry
good.
then. I had all of these nice slides there and you didn't see any of them. So that is unfortunate. My apologies. I won't go back and start all of this again. We will keep on going forward.
No worries.
That's all right. Thank you. The webinar that we've got today is structured around 2 one-hour sessions. There was one of these that was held 6 hours ago. And this is the second one. Both of them are following the same structure, and both of them have the same keynote speaker, Vivian Mack. Today we have 2 panelists who weren't with us this morning. I'll be presenting them shortly. Vivian will give us a keynote speaker first. Then I have some questions for the panelists. And then we would also like to have questions from you as participants. So to do so, please submit your questions via the chat using the icon at the bottom of your screen, and that will be picked up by some of our support team, who you can see on the screen here, and they will then pass that over to me, and we will put that to the panelists. At the end of the webinar, I'll be asking you to do a quick survey, a feedback survey. And finally, if you have any technical problems, such as not being able to see the screen that I thought that I was sharing, please send a message to our technical team, and they will work and try and correct that. So with that, I would like to, I'll pass this over to Vivian, who will... Hope is there, and we'll hopefully have her screen up. Yes, her screen is up now. So Vivian is Vivian is studying at the International Forest Ecosystem Management at University of Sustainable Development in Eberswald in Germany. In her thesis, she focused on gender discrimination in forestry students, and she'll be talking a little bit about that. Vivian is also the head of the IFSA Gender Subcommission. So that's the International Forestry Students Association, as you can see there on the screen. And most particularly, or most interestingly, she was also the first person to actually complete the MOOC course. So welcome, Vivian. Pleasure to have you with us today, and over to you. Thank you.
I apologize. It seems that we lost Vivian for a second. So I will assume that she has a problem with internet connection, and she is currently in Panama. And it's early morning.
Then Tadora, I believe that you have the narrative that goes with Vivian's presentation.
Yes, I do. Although it's going to be challenging. For those who are joining the second session that we have today in the morning, Vivian was also with us in the first session with different panelists, but same keynote speaker. And she presented this work that IFSA and her were doing. So basically, in her presentation, Vivian was talking about rooted inequalities in forest education. And she was sharing her journey around the open letter on gender in forest educations and the actions taken through workshops and initiatives. And she also reflected on the impacts they've seen so far, both on the encouraging responses and challenges that are still present. She also gave the insights into her bachelor thesis, where she conducted a study on student experiences on gender-related discrimination and gender diversity in their studies. So it's a really challenging role for me to step in her shoes, but I think she's joining just.
Yeah.
Hi, Vivian.
Hello.
No worries.
Oh, good.
Vivian,
I'm so
we lost
sorry.
you. No worries, we
Yeah.
lost you for a moment, but I actually introduced your first slide, so I announced what you are going to talk about. So welcome back. Hopefully your connection stays stable. Stephen, Vivian, could you continue? So I told what is the presentation about, and if you can continue with IFSA just the right moment.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank
Tudor.
you. Thank you, Vivian.
Stephen. All right, here I'm back on track. So a small introduction into IFSA, the International Forest Student Association. It's the largest network worldwide, entirely run by students, completely on a volunteer based, and we are divided into 141 local committees in 64 different countries. And we enrich our members' education through international events, intercultural exchanges, and also networking. I'm here today, and I'm a white, Central European, able-bodied, and a cis woman. And where I come from and who I am, of course, shapes the way I see and experience the world. So that's why I don't want to speak only from my perspective today here. I'm here to share a variety of voices, like voices from across the global IFSA network. Through our work in Gender Subcommission, we've been reaching out to students from all over the world to learn from one another and to expand our collective understanding. So today I want to bring some of these voices also into the room with us. In 2021, an open letter was published by two IFSA members, Teresa Clara Loch and Barbara Oehler, and it was titled Gender in Forest Education, and it called for more gender equality and for learning spaces that are conscious and inclusive of different identities. And the response was overwhelming, so that's when we decided to organize workshops. The goal was simple: to create an open space for conversations to better understand the experiences forestry students are having worldwide, and to reflect on how these experiences can guide our work in the Gender Subcommission. Today, I would also like to share some insights from two of these workshops. So we asked open questions like intentionally leaving space for honesty, for nuance, and for storytelling. And what we received was really powerful. So we didn't just hear about pain and frustration. We heard about resilience. We heard about support and students' visions for a better and more equitable future in forestry. And but it's okay. Well, across our regions, three themes coming up. So patterns begin to emerge, clear and consistent and powerful. And perhaps most importantly, what we heard is that many students said that for the first time they didn't feel alone, and that being in a space where these topics were spoken out loud, where people listened, believed, and understood was deeply empowering. First, what are our experiences with gender-related discrimination in forest education, we asked. And first, let's start with the educational environment. Many students find themselves in the male-dominated space, whether it's the classroom, it's a lab, or the images we see in forestry promotion materials. These environments can feel unwelcoming and even intimidating. We also heard stories of sexist jokes being brushed off as normal, and unspoken pressure to adapt, to laugh along, to blend in, to not make a fuss. And in some cases, students, particularly FINTER students, so female, inter, non-binary, trans, and asexual students, experience sexual harassment. And we have this one quote, which we brought. I could not practice chainsaw class because the male instructor felt that girls are slow in learning and sometimes they overreact, which will put the class in danger. Yeah. So then there are physical and mental barriers also. Things we often don't talk about enough is like people dealing with menstruation in remote field conditions, for example, or to something as basic as the lack of the right facilities, appropriate facilities. And beyond the physical, there's also the mental weight of self-doubt, which people talked a lot about. So this fear of not sounding smart enough holds many students back from participating in discussions, and even when when they have something important to contribute. And in the early stage of a career, these challenges don't magically disappear, unfortunately. But we've heard from young professionals whose ideas were dismissed or ignored, whose proposals weren't taken seriously, and then knew deep down that gender was the reason. And regarding my thesis, my Richard thesis had the title, The Dynamics of Gender Relations and Sexism in Forestry Studies, a study among students at the HANI and their experiences. And I explored sexism and gender diversity, how they are experienced within the study programs Forestry and International Forest Ecosystem Management, which I have studied from the Eberswalder University for Sustainable Development, the HNEE. And to do this, I conducted both a qualitative and a quantitative survey in 2024. And the results offer a current snapshot of the situation at my university. And most participants reported that they had not experienced gender-based discrimination, which is encouraging, which is great. But however, a minority did share such experiences, and these were primarily reported by Finter individuals. So I think, and I found out like in my studies, like we are seeing encouraging shifts in how women are represented and perceived in the forestry sector. And studies have shown that the image of a woman as an exception is in this field is starting to break up. But at present, IFM, so my study program, is the only forestry program in Germany with a 50% women's quota. The others are not higher. In fact, so the gender balance in this specific program show that more women are finding their place in forestry-related work. But also the more traditional forestry program from my university, the number of women were also started to rise like year by year. And many reported feeling comfortable, feeling and present and recognizing the shift from a male-dominated field toward a more open and inclusive profession. And the overall mood was cautiously optimistic. Having a little dive into the atmosphere and the social dynamics people have reported from. I have asked students also, for example, whether gender balance in their study program had an impact on their learning experience. And interestingly, around 50% of the different groups answered no. But several reports have been made of homosocial behavior and patriarchal behaviors. And meanwhile, Finter students felt that they have to often more prove themselves. So also what we saw with the IFSA workshops people have shared. And talking about the academic dynamics, so while asking this in relation to GEDI, more than half of the response said that gender awareness and teaching language was only very partly considered. And similar feedback on the use of non-stereotypical gender images in gender diverse literature was quite mixed. So still reports of stereotypical portrayals in course materials persisted, for example, assumptions that women are less strong, less resilient, or unfit for certain tasks. And also participants highlighted that feminist perspectives and the work of female experts in the field were often completely left out. In some cases, the teaching itself seemed implicitly designed for a male audience, people reported. Also, the question was raised, what would an ideal gender equal forest education look like to you? And we received a lot of different answers, and we collected them. And at first, we need a mandatory gender equality education for all forestry students, because understanding power dynamics and respectful behaviors should not be optional. Second, our curriculum must reflect the world we live in. So let's make some teaching materials, field trips, and case study which are inclusive and represent of all genders. And yes, we also need more role models, visible role models, more Finter lecturers, mentors, and leaders. And when we talk also about support structures, we ask them they ask for things like more safer spaces where students can speak freely without fear of judgment. And they ask for mentoring programs, so they have someone they can turn to. And also another important point, I think, is that feminist topics often also speak most to those who experience the discrimination. But that does not mean like others should stay silent. It means we must actively include and engage everyone, so especially those with the most power to make a change. So I quickly gonna summarize this up. So the result of this workshop and my survey clearly show that gender-based differences and experiences of discrimination in forestry education are still present and must be addressed. We need more awareness and training, more representation of marginalized voices, and safe and inclusive environments. And one thing is absolutely clear. We cannot ignore the experiences of the minority. So they may be statistically small, not important, but they carry deep meaning and they signal where work still needs to be done. So I thank you a lot for your attention, for following me in this presentation. I'm sorry for the lack of internet connection. I would like to invite you also to get in contact with us at the Gender Subcommission, and feel free to share the open letter furthermore in your university or wherever. And don't forget to listen and talk to students. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much, Vivian. As a white male professor in a rich country university, listening to Vivian's presentation, I find that both very discouraging and very encouraging. It's discouraging because I recognize that universities, forestry schools, we recognize the truth and the validity of what Vivian has described there, and that situation that she found in her university is replicated all around the world, and we need to do something about it. I find it encouraging because we are starting to do something about it. You are starting to do something about it. The people in this panel are all working on this. People participating in this from around the world are contributing to this, are pushing back. And that is what is just so encouraging. So thank you very much, Vivian. As we go forward for the rest of this panel, I'd just like to present our two other speakers who will now be joining us, and we'll be addressing some questions. So first of all, we've got Rogelio Molina Garcia. Rogelio is a forest engineer, holds a PhD in forest sciences from Argentina. She works at the Institute of Research in Natural Resources, Agroecology and Rural Development in El Bolson, located in the Andes. Now, if you have no idea where El Bolson is, which was like me, the first time I met Rogelio, I had to look it up on the internet and find out where it is, and it's absolutely magnificent spot. It's got wonderful photos, so have a look at it on the internet and just find out a little bit about it. She works on on analyzing the socio-political drivers of land use in Patagonia's forest areas and in the mountain regions. She's particularly interested in forest policy, sustainability, assessment in forest management, land use policies, and protected areas. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Rogelio, for joining us. Our second panelist is John Boaka Donke. John was originally trained as a geographer in Ghana. He's undertaken further studies in Japan and in Canada, and holds a PhD from the University of Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, quite different to where Rogelio is. Saskatchewan is one of the flat parts of Canada. But he is now over in working out of Calgary, where he can at least see mountains on the horizon. John works as social planner with the city of Calgary. He's an adjunct professor in environment and sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan. And he's been especially active here in Canada in expanding GEDI research in the forest sector, away from just a focus on gender, but also to include a wider view of diversity that includes immigrants, differently abled people, and other identities. So thank you very much, Vivian, Rohio, John, for being with us. I have some questions for everybody, but I will also remind all participants to please put your own questions into the chat. People in the back room will send those through to me, and I hope to be able to share some of your questions. So, Rohio, I'll start with you. You're a woman. You're a forest engineer. You're a researcher. Your field of research is land use changes in the Andes. But when we set up ForGEDI, you volunteered to contribute to this, to bring in your experience. So can you please briefly explain why you think it's so important for foresters of all types to know about gender and diversity?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Well, I believe that gender and diversity are essential because they are present in our profession and in the landscape we manage. From my own experience working in forest research in the Andes, I have seen firsthand how gender roles shape people's access to resources, participation in decision-making, and forest management. And these issues often remain invisible. So I believe it's crucial to bring them up to known of everyone, from the theory to also the practical examples in the landscape and in our professional workplaces. As Vivian previously said, forestry is a field that continues to be male dominant. And this creates a set of gender and social barriers that can limit the participation and the recognition of women and other marginalized groups, not only in academic and professional spaces, but also in the communities and the forest land that we work with. So when we incorporate the knowledge, we become more sensible and better observers. We can see the underlying power structures and the social dynamics that operate and influence forest management. So understanding gender and diversity is essential if we want to become responsible professionals. And lastly, I want to highlight as a strength that we have in our forestry community, that although it's relatively small, it's often very connected and collaborative. And this gives us a unique opportunity if we want to use our network to raise awareness and actively promote more inclusive practices. So courses like ForGEDI are great starting points, but it's what we do with that knowledge also that really matters, how we bring it into research, into management, and include it into our field work.
Okay, thank you very much, Rohio. John, I'll move on to you with a second question, if I may. In your work in Canada, you've shown that forestry in Canada is becoming more diversified. There's more people of different backgrounds involved, but that norms and practices still reflect the expectation that most of them are people like me. And this actually came up in one of my classes several weeks ago. And the students in my class actually raised the situation, giving an example of white workers in forest industry here in Eastern Canada who were refusing to share accommodation in a forestry camp with non-white workers. And the students were quite convinced that this was not good. They believed this was not the right way to do. But their question was, what can we do? What should we do? And so that's my question for you now, John, is how would you reply to a student who said, hey, Dr. Boakadonke, what should I do as a forester when the people I work with are sexist or racist or otherwise discriminatory?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah, okay, yeah. I think this is a very important question, and I'm not sure whether I'm the most qualified to answer that, because I haven't worked in the forestry in the field. But fortunately for me, I've had the opportunity, I think about at the peak of the COVID, where as part of the work that with you and others, I was trying to understand the experiences of underrepresented groups like women, indigenous people, immigrants, and all other groups within forestry. And so one of the questions that I asked them was really around how do you respond to such instances like racist or sexist when they come in your work environment? And there were several examples that people gave. There were people who had to reflect on their own experiences and share tears in those. So fortunately, I've heard from people who have worked in the industry and have told me how they reacted, and they reflected on that, whether that was a good strategy or how they react and how they can also give advice to people. And so there were 4 main themes that came up in terms of how people react. And I think this could be, depending on how they do have different, either positive or negative, or there are different implications in terms of how you react. So I think one of the most common ways that people react is through personal coping or inward strategies. Like personally, you have to cope with it. And that requires that other people are depersonalizing, they are ignoring microaggressions, or just internalizing whatever situation they're experiencing. And that was the most dominant approach that people take. Now, the other one that came up was around self-empowerment or direct actions, where people have to confront the issues head on. And so this requires that in most cases, people have to be self-advocating for themselves or preparing to stand up for themselves. So they have to search for what are the best or personal practices that they can use to be able to address this. And then the third one was around either depending on peers or peer-based strategies, like you depend on your peers to help you. And the least approaches that people took was around organizational structural solution, that is reporting to managers or reporting to the institution, or whether there was a direct line. So that was the least. And so that tells you really what the state is and how supportive we are with these things. And so with what I would say is that, especially with personal strategies, they might be very, in terms of what a positive thing might be, is that they might, in the instance, because the culture might not support it, they might avoid conflict, or they might preserve your mental energy in a very hostile environment. And they may reduce that pressure, that overt confrontation that might exacerbate a very tense situation. But in the long term, is that the best approach to do this? Because it tends to normalize or perpetuate this toxic culture. It might isolate the target, and it can have a long-term emotional toll on the person doing that. So that is what it can do. But those who were really actively resisting self-advocate, self-empowerment, direct action, where the advocates, they stand for themselves, I think those are probably the most important approaches that people can take, because it's in a way empowers individuals to assert their boundaries. They will challenge discrimination, and it's sort of more proactive. They model accountability, and then it's much more around fostering self-awareness, and then you are confronting the issue. But is it everyone who can do that, right? It boosts your self-confidence. It makes you much more powerful in that regard, and it may raise awareness among peers and survive, because people can see you that you are reacting and you are prompting change. But can everyone do that in an environment where that is not supportive? It might risk retaliation, burnout, and others talk about that. And especially people being labeled as difficult. I think it came out quite well for people who confront the issues head on. They are being labeled as being very difficult to work with, and it requires institutional backing, and in most instances, these things are not there. So in the long term, that can be quite exhausting, especially when you are consistently advocating for self-advocacy in an environment where systemic issues are quite common, especially if leadership is not very supporting. And so I think the advice that I would give is that I think we have to think about not just for ourselves, but what are we doing? Do we want to confront the issue? Do we have the capacity to do that? And so this question, in a way, reflect that the response should be on the individual, because in most instances, the support is not there. Unless the support is there, leadership and institutional structures are there to back us, then I think it might continue to revert to individuals, and I don't think that is the way that needs to go. I think there should be more accountability from leadership, and people should be supported when they confront the issue. But I don't think the responsibility rests on individuals when these issues come up. I think there should be more accountability, institutional awareness when these things come up. But unfortunately, these are not the most common approaches that people use, and it's still resort to individual ways of doing that.
Thank you very much, John. And I must say, I find your response disturbing in its truthfulness, in that often the expectation is that this is an individual response to either grin and bear it, accept it, to adjust yourself, and that there was so little there on an institutional or organizational response. And this morning, in the session that we had earlier on today, Professor Peter Kanowski from ANU made the point that what was really needed is those institutional responses, so that it doesn't become, it's not a burden upon one person. So thank you very much for that, John. Vivian, I'll come over to you, please. You were the first person to actually go through the whole of the MOOC. What do you see as the value added of the course? What were the gaps, and what did it bring in terms of benefit to you as a student? But also, what are the gaps and what are the challenges that remain? Oh. And I think we might have lost Vivian again, I'm afraid. Okay, then. Well, then I will keep on going forward with that, and so we'll go back to John and to Rocio with other questions. Oh, hold on. Oh, Vivian.
Here I am again. This is amazing. Okay.
Okay. Are you able to respond to a question? Where do you see the added value of the MOOC, and what are the gaps and challenges that remain for us there?
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so I think what really stood out for me was how the course connected theory with real world practice. So it highlighted how gender equality, diversity, and inclusion are not just an abstract concept, but are fundamental to how we shape the future of forest landscapes, forest education, and forest governance. And I think two values that stood out for me a lot were the global perspective. First, that the course brought together like case studies and voices from all over the world, which helped me to understand much more like how differently gender dynamics play out in various forest contexts. And also the other second point is that empowerment through representation happened a lot for me. So like seeing all these experts, especially women and people from more marginalized backgrounds, and they're leading in forestry related fields, that was very motivating for me, very powerful. I really enjoyed that a lot. And of course there are always some gaps and challenges. I mean, we're celebrating only the first year, so it's like still young. I think one thing is that awareness is still like uneven. So not a lot of forestry programs actually integrate gender and diversity topics into the curriculum. So this is very rare still. But students still like, they don't really encounter this topic, GEDI topics, maybe these discussions during their studies, unless they actively seek them out. And also the institutional barriers. So gender-based exclusion, subtle bias, and structural discrimination are still present, of course, both in educational and professional settings. So this still, like our workshops and the surveys, like they showed this like with our members. And I think there's also still the need for a deeper intersectionality. So while the course, of course, touched like already multiple aspects of identity, there's still more room to better explore how gender intersects with race, class, sexuality, and colonial histories and forced contexts, I think. So I think overall ForGEDI was a great step forward, but it's just like a step, and we need to continue the dialogue to more inclusive policies, active efforts, more institutions to embed GEDI principles into the core of forest education and practice. Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
Good, thank you very much, Vivian. You've given us a very strong challenge there, and so I'm going to now throw that challenge back to John and to Rocio. Education is important. Education is critical. High quality education, we need to have that access to free access. It's a fundamental form of empowerment. It's a stepping stone to addressing the environmental and social problems, the justice issues that we need to do. Now, that is actually, traditionally, forestry education was sort of seen as teaching people how to manage forests, particularly manage forests for a production goal point. And quite frankly, that is still the dominant ethos in a university forestry program, such as where I teach. Vivian has told us we need to go further. How do we do it? How can John and Rocio, and I'll put this one to possibly to John first this time. How can forestry education serve as a tool for transformation, for resistance, for empowerment, and to help us move towards these better futures that Vivian talked about? John, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think this is forestry education really holds a very big potential to drive the kind of change that we are all looking for. And I think at the core of that ability to transform, that means how do we shift the paradigms that are there? How do we resist and challenge oppressive structures? And how do we really equip people that are underrepresented with the agency to really work in forestry? I think those really are the core thing that needs to happen. And so how do we do that? What are the ways that we can do that? I think it starts really with how can we really think about reimagining forestry education and practice in terms of what that means. And here I always defer to the conversation that I had with forestry students around asking them, when I was doing the research, there were people who were in forestry school that reached out to me, although those were not a target. They said, oh, this is very important, but it is not talked about in our classes. And therefore, I'm very interested in having these conversations. And so that requires that we really need to, if we are looking for a forestry education that embeds equity, justice, and sustainability as a core of what it teaches, then we need to think about how do you reimagine how forestry knowledge should be like what really counts as knowledge within forestry. And I think we've talked a lot about how we can decolonize forestry educational curricula, and I don't think we've gone far ahead with that. I think we need to be more intentional around that in terms of how we can integrate different knowledge systems within that paradigm. I think that needs to be much more practical. And as we more talk around how we can do that, but I don't think we've gone far enough in terms of how we can decolonize or diversify the curricula to really bring in these soft issues that we haven't really, that we know do exist, that we haven't really talked about quite well. And that requires that we also be very explicit around how we can address the history and the structural inequalities that exist. I think most often we agree that the history around forestry in terms of how gendered it is and how dispossessing some of them might be, but we are not very intentional in terms of how we talk about that uncomfortable history within forestry. And I think that needs to be done because that recognition really, it recognizes that we want to challenge the systems that are there. And we are explicitly very intentional around bringing this conversation to the core. And for me, that is very important because of some of the people that I talk to. Some have worked in forestry for 30, 20 years. And for them, that was the first time they were sharing their stories. And some were even, they had to share tears, and I didn't know how I can even address that. So I think we need to give opportunity for these voices to come to challenge the system and to know that we can normalize these conversations in forestry education. I think that needs really to happen. So before even people go to the field, they know that these things exist. We are arming them with the tools to be able to address them when they come. And so I think we can do a better job at doing that. And the last thing I want to highlight is that there were also a lot of people who talk about the fact that the people who are leading, the people whose voices have been counted, the people who are leading and being at a leadership position, they don't identify with them. There are a few people who thought that, except within urban forestry where they can see people who are like them, within traditional forestry schools, they don't see them. So they need to have more people that looks like them. How can we amplify the voices of marginalized groups? And that requires that we open the space and opportunity for women foresters, racialized foresters, people who come with forestry education from elsewhere, and they have to go through, especially in Canada, they have to go through mountains of steps to be able to do that. Like they need to share those stories as learners, co-instructors in the way that we teach the course. And so I think those are really very important. And yeah, I think for me, those are really the core issues that I will address, because I think those are at the core. Once we bring these voices to the table, they are the core of really empowering people to have agency and to know that we can talk about our comfortable past, and that should really serve as the way that we engage with the way that forestry should be, because it's going to be more about really around knowledge, right? And not just the brute way that we do forest. And that requires that everyone has to come in. We need everyone to be part of that transformation and that future that forestry should be like.
Thank you very much, John. There's a lot there for us to work on. I can see a couple of needs and things that I think that this the ForGEDI task force can pick up on there and move forward. Rohio, I'd like to put the same question to you, please. How do you see forestry education as a tool for transformation, for resistance, for empowerment, and for moving forward here?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Well, first of all, highlight that education can challenge dominant paradigms and support alternative ways of how do we think forests, how do we think the territory, and how do we think communities as well. And in this, forestry education can be a powerful tool for empowerment. And I want to highlight free and open access high-quality education platforms like this. I think that help to democratize knowledge, but making it available to people in different geographies and socioeconomic contexts. And I think this is also a way of resistance, right? To resistance of these barriers that exist in socioeconomic contexts and in geographic. And I believe that first highlighting these power imbalances that exist, uplift marginalized voices, like John said, like bringing up different kind of model that include different people. And also I wanted to highlight into transformative change, the inclusion of the leadership of women, that we can see that is really important, and it brings up the inclusion of women in leadership roles, communication improvement, diversity, and also uplifting and the involvement of people in sustainability practices. And in this, gender inclusion is related to a more sustainable context. So yeah, and with this, I wanted to end up with the, as John previously said, with the involvement and the inclusion of different role models for different social characteristics.
Okay, thank you very much, Rohio. Within the structure of the new task force, one of the mandates that we have is to keep on moving forward with education and outreach activities. And I'm starting to think there, I think that within the different members of the task force, we will need to start discussing how to address some of the issues that both of you have just raised. Originally, I was going to put the same question to Vivian. I'm not. Vivian, we've had a question come in from Wagner Leone, who says, and it does sort of follow on from what we've just been asking to John and Rohio, but Wagner says, can you provide an example for teaching that it being implicitly designed for a male audience? Now, this I think is very interesting, because often we see gender and diversity as something that's being directed to women or to racialized people. But this is, Wagner is asking something, hey, for people like me, for the male forestry students, what should we be doing for them? So question from Wagner, can you please provide an example for teaching being implicitly designed for a male audience? Oh.
Yeah. I think with that one said, and with this comment I made, and like as I said, this is all what I collected and all through my studies, and what I was referring then again, and as it was also qualitative, certain people could have, like, they made comments, they wrote their stories, it was like more open. And I think what this point especially is like making a point on the sociality in gender contexts, like this concept of that, like if one flies under the radar, like people surround each other with like same people kind of, and so if there's like a room full of men, then maybe also like the teacher, who's often also identifies as a man, like would more interact with them and like make them feel more comfortable, or like it just is a very social and psychological thing that is like happening, I think, often, that you would be getting more easy along with the people who are maybe more the same as you. So it is a kind of an undercover hidden power structures, I think, which happen a lot in workplaces and institutions. And yeah, if I think about the example or like especially example, I think it's just really like how it's such things which are hard to really point out directly. It is more like how people feel, and it's like in between the lights. But like forest education, I think, when it's like designed with men in mind, like literature was for men, and it does not mean to be intentionally or that, but yeah, I think it's the way leadership and also teamwork is then happening for people and how they feel and confidence over collaborating and everything. Yeah, and then also like how communication was done. Yeah, so I think it's more in these. But yeah, it's a big question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Wagner, for sending that question in. If there are any other questions, please send them in. We are getting towards the end of our time, though. So in sort of moving towards a wrap-up type question, for each of our three panelists, I have to, again, look very much towards our participants at the moment. I'm looking forward to where we can go with them and what they should be doing. So I'll put this question to you then. How can young professionals and forestry students play an active role in advancing GEDI within the forestry sector? And what advice would you offer them? This time I might start with John, if you would. Sorry, no, I'll start with Rahil. Can you go first on that one, please?
Yes, sure. Well, I think youth are crucially important. And me myself, I work in youth networks, and I think if we think of sustainable forest management, we have to include youth voices because they are the professionals of tomorrow, and they have an open-mindedness, a critical thinking, and a proactive approach, as well as they bring up some fresh vision. And also, I think into gender and diversity, they are really sensitive that this is also a crucial aspect for these issues. So I think the involvement of youth and students plays a vital role in this process. And I think using these tools and getting them involved into this kind of initiatives like ForGEDI will help to spread the word, to empower, and also to bring this up to some marginalized group and adapt it to different perspectives. So I think it is a necessary strategy to advance into these issues.
Okay, thank you very much, Rahil. John, have you got a comment on what how young professionals and students can play an active role in advancing GEDI?
Yeah, briefly, I think young professionals, students, they hold quite a unique role to challenge the status quo and then be champion for GEDI within forestry. And I say that because they bring very fresh perspectives. They have growing networks. They have the tools that are available to share, to grow. And I think they have that willingness to innovate. And so, but the starting point to being very active in this space is really learn the reason behind GEDI. So I think that's very important. I think that building that knowledge is really very critical. It gives you that ability to really, so self-education is very important. It's a starting point for raising awareness. It's a starting point for engaging in conversation. So I think that is where it needs to start. At the end of the day, I think they have all the necessary tools, the power of the media to do that. But I think that's self-education, that being embedded in networks and really seeking out opportunities to be engaged in like the International Forestry Association. I think those are very important. But I think that power, that voice that they have, and that opportunity to use media to bring sunlight on the very systemic issues, but also contemporary issues within forestry is really very important. So I think that is where the key role that they can play. There are many ways, but I think those are, where the key role can be. And so that is really at the core of calling for transparency and accountability is very important in that space. So I will just talk about the power that they have to, I think that's the key thing that I will highlight. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I'll put the same question to you, Vivian, in 1 minute, because we've just had a comment has come in from Carol, who's coming in on this theme, but from a slightly different perspective, and just saying forestry education is already focused on men, but we don't really pay any attention to that. And one area that has not really been addressed in forestry education, to Carol's view, has been the idea that varying ideals of masculinity. She thinks that would be an interesting thing for students to look at, to think more about it. And I will actually pick up on that and see in one of my courses earlier on this, about a month and a half ago, a student was using AI to produce images of foresters in a work environment. And when he did his little presentation on that, I said, X, all of your images of foresters are men wearing checked shirts and having big beards and boots. You have completely ignored anyone else. And he said, yes, Stephen, I did know that, but AI was only producing images like that for me. And I thought that actually said a lot about exactly going to Carol's point, that there is so much there that is hidden there. But anyway, over to you, Vivian. What should John talked about the importance of IFSA and connections between students and being engaged. So I'll give this one back to you as our last comment. What should young professionals, what should students be doing to play an active role in advancing GEDI?
Yeah, it's interesting that the question actually goes to students. So I think more it's in reality, everyone in this room, as cheesy as it sounds, has the power and to make a difference and has power to do something, whether you're a student, you're a researcher, you're a lecturer, you're a practitioner. Everyday decisions matter. So I think I can quite good keep on what the others have said and just summarize it, because I had some similar ideas. So I would also start with self-reflection. So ask yourself whose voices are missing in your classrooms, in my team, in my research, what is missing? Like, what assumptions do I make without realizing it? Also, GEDI works always begins with awareness. And then I would also say we should diversify the sources you're using, the use and cite research from women, from indigenous scholars and thinkers from the global south. And this representation in academia matters a lot, I think, and knowledge is richer when it comes from different perspectives. And also create a more safe or more inclusive spaces. So whether you're leading a workshop, you're leading a group project, you're teaching a class, hosting something, think about how to include and uplift maybe the more quiet voices, or make a room for different experiences. Think about how to bring a new change into that. And also the last point I wanted to make is to challenge the bias when you see it. So this does not always mean you have to have a direct confrontation. It can mean asking a thoughtful question, or checking in with someone after a meeting if you had the feeling that's what maybe not correct, but this was not 100%. And I think these small moments of allyship make a big impact in this progress we're facing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you very much, Rohio. Thank you very much, John. We're at the end of our webinar. Before we wrap, Tadora, if you can just share that slide that's got the connection information. Please, we would like to keep this discussion going with you, remain in contact, so there's some information there. I'd like to thank everybody very much for being part of this. I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed hearing the views of our panelists, the questions and the feedback that has been coming in on the chat. So thank you very much, everyone. We do have a short survey. So at the when this, you can see the QR code there on the screen, and also when the webinar closes, then in fact you will be able to, you will get a link to do the survey. So we ask you just to help to complete that for us. And I look forward to being able to reconnect with many of you in other activities with ForGEDI. And even if you choose not to keep on being involved in other activities with ForGEDI, please remember the comments and the emphasis that all of our panelists have provided in being involved yourself, and to keep moving forward on this. So thank you very much. Take care, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Tadora, are we still on, or are we off?
Yeah, you are still off.
I was reading the comments only.
Yes, there was a
Sorry, I
comment
was
from
reading
Peter.
because
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh, wow.
Okay, we stop now so people can get the link, and
Yep.
we stay in touch. I will send the links for the recordings soon.
Thank you, Tadora.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
Steve.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good day.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Okay,
Bye.
thanks very much, Rohio. Thanks very much, Vivian. Thanks, Tadora.
Thanks.